Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support, please subscribe. The real cause of death of Arthur Tudor, Henry VIII's older brother. Henry VIII could very easily have never been king. He's known today as England's most famous and brutal king, having 6 wives, of which 2 of them were executed by Henry's orders. Inside the Tower of London, Boleyn and Catherine Howard were executed, and these events tell us what lengths Henry would go to get his way, reigning terror over the country. Over 70,000 people were executed during Henry VIII's time on the throne, but things could, and possibly should have been, very different across England. Henry was not the first in line to the throne, and it was only after the death of his elder brother that Henry became the successor. Arthur Tudor is one of history's great what-ifs. What if he hadn't have died at the age of 15 inside Ludlow Castle? If he hadn't, the face of English history would have been changed, and we would never have had his younger brother Henry VIII on the throne. But today we look at the real cause of death of Arthur Tudor, Henry VIII's older brother. And remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Born on roughly the 20th of September 1486, Arthur Tudor was the eldest son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. The birth of Arthur signalled the hope for a long and prosperous Tudor dynasty, and he became the Duke of Cornwall at birth. He was baptised at 4 days old, and he was then raised in a nursery before becoming the Prince of Wales in 1490. Following this, he was awarded his own household and was seen as the heir apparent to Henry VII. His father and mother had 6 children, with only 3 surviving to adulthood. Arthur was close to his younger sister Margaret and also brother Henry. He was shrouded in great titles, becoming a Knight of the Bath, and his investitures as Prince of Wales took place at Westminster Palace. He was taken down the River Thames on the royal barge, and more titles came. He became a Knight of the Garter and then began his formal education. Educating the heir to the throne was very important, and he learnt grammar, ethics, history, and many other subjects. It was noted that he was very clever. He possessed a good aptitude for learning, as well as being a very talented archer and dancer. It's believed by some that Arthur was a sickly child. However, there is very little substance in this. He was tall for his age, had reddish hair, and looked similar to his younger brother Henry, who was described as extremely handsome. He was a delicate young man and had a gentle personality. In the May of 1490, he became the warden of all the marshes towards Scotland, and his household oversaw the peace in the northern areas. He was also named Keeper of England when his father travelled to France. Arthur Tudor was involved in the Council of Wales and the Marshes to help enforce royal authority, and the prince was given large amounts of land in Wales and on the border regions. Now Henry VII planned to marry his eldest son Arthur to a daughter of the Catholic monarchs Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. This would help him to forge an alliance between England and Spain against the French, and it was suggested that Arthur should marry their youngest daughter, Catherine of Aragon. Now Catherine would later also become Henry VIII's first wife, and Catherine's dowry was set at what today would be roughly around £8 to £9 million, and an agreement was made that when they reached legal age, according to the church, they would be married. The Pope agreed to waive Arthur's age limit, and they were betrothed on the 25th of August 1497. They were then married by proxy 2 years later, and letters were exchanged between the two. Catherine wrote to her dearest spouse, "I cannot tell you what an eternal desire I feel to see your highness, and how vexatious to me it is the procrastination about your coming. Let it be hastened that the love conceived between us, and the wished for joys may reap their proper fruit." Catherine arrived in England on the 2nd of October 1501, and the couple met for the first time in November of 1501. Arthur said he would be a loving and true husband, but they could not communicate well, as they had been taught different variations of Latin. The formal marriage ceremony took place on the 14th of November 1501 at St Paul's Cathedral, and it was a lavish ceremony. The bedding ceremony then took place. After staying together at Tickenhill Manor for a month, the royal couple then went to the Welsh marshes and set up a household at Ludlow Castle. Here Arthur attempted to govern over Wales from his castle in the border regions, and he found this easy, as at the time there was peace between the two countries. However, things would go downhill very quickly. The plague and diseases that had been hanging around the town of Ludlow for some time, and Arthur disregarded this and continued to live there and conduct his duties there. But in March of 1502 he was struck down along with Catherine by an illness. They were ordered to go back to their beds and were stuck in their rooms whilst doctors attended on them. Things did not look good, and the household staff and servants were told to pray for the young prince and princess. But things were not good. Catherine remained sick in her bedroom, but Arthur became seriously ill. Whilst confined to his room in Ludlow Castle, he died, and many have speculated what the real cause of the Prince of Wales' death may have been. Different ideas have been put forward. Some suggest that the young prince suffered with cancer, or a form of tuberculosis known at the time as consumption. It's also been suggested that he and Catherine both suffered from the dreaded sweating sickness. This is an illness that struck England in the 15th century for the first time, and it was something that kept coming back. It was thought to have been carried by rats, and the symptoms were like modern-day flu and pneumonia. A sufferer would have aches all over their body, headaches, dehydration, and awful sweating. The fever would be very serious, and the patient would be very exhausted and would wish to sleep most of the time, along with being very dizzy. If someone caught the illness, sometimes they died within 24 hours. It was said, for that noble Prince Arthur, the king's first begotten son, departed out of this transitory life in his castle of Ludlow, and with a great funeral he was buried in the cathedral church of Worcester. Arthur's death was a great shock, and his father Henry VII was distraught, his mother also incredibly upset, and she later would die early too. After his death, Arthur Tudor's body was disemboweled and then filled with spices and embalmed in a way that was common during the Tudor period. He had been laying in state before being taken to a local church where 3 masses were said. In the pouring rain on the 25th of April 1502, the coffin was taken to Worcester Cathedral in a huge ceremony. However, the rain was said to have been so bad that the cart carrying the coffin got stuck in the mud a number of times. Around 550 people were involved in the funeral, in which 2,400 yards of black mourning cloth was brought. Over 1,000 candles were burnt and prayers were said for the young prince. Henry VII ordered a huge tomb to be created in memory of his eldest son. So the death of Arthur Tudor still is inconclusive as to what definitely killed the young prince. It's most probable that it was sweating sickness that made him and his wife unwell, and this was incredibly serious at the time. Arthur Tudor was meant to be the second Tudor king, the king who would have hopefully had a long and prosperous reign featuring a number of children. If this would have happened, he would have passed the throne on to his children, and Henry VIII would never have become the King of England. History could have been incredibly different if he did not pass away inside the walls of Ludlow Castle. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.